And good evening, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode and a resurgence of Compass of Curiosities. So, you may realize that I have the Jack in my name there. It is brought up by a very specific way of how this show tells us. And I am the Jack of all trades, but the master of none. So, that is what we're going to go with. So I will be Russ the Jack Stiver from now on out. Um, I want to thank Mike, Buddy, everybody over at Legit Paranormal for welcoming on their network. Tonight we have a awesome guest, John Ward. He's from Ohio, and he is an amazing author. I've read some snippets from his books. I've read a couple of the reviews, and he is being referred to as the modern day R.L. Stine. So I want to bring in John, and my God, like how does it feel to be regarded as the modern day R.L. Stine?
Uh, it's funny. It's the easy comparison to make. I don't know. I grew up loving R.L. Stine, and obviously he's a huge inspiration to my writing style. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to carve out my own niche, but if the worst comes to worst, and the worst comparison is that I'm compared to R.L. Stine, then I'm doing pretty decently, I think. So.
Now, for all of you out there that don't know who R.L. Stine is, he is the one that wrote the Goosebumps books that us older generation grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
That were absolutely fantastic. It's scholastic book fairs. You'd always look for the R.L. Stine books.
Yep. It's funny. Like up until a couple of years ago, I didn't realize how long ago those books came out, and I have the first original edition copies, and they're like 1992, so they're 31 years old now, which is crazy. So yeah.
Now, isn't it a fun fact that R.L. Stine is actually from Ohio?
He is, yeah.
Where you're based, so you're just growing into the roots of Ohio even more.
Yeah, it's funny. Ohio's got a lot of horror roots in terms of what's been produced out of the state. Obviously, R.L. Stine being one. And obviously, we got a lot of horror movie fans as well. But Wes Craven is also from Ohio. And then, if you ever watched the horror movie cult classic Trick or Treat, that director is also from Ohio. So, a lot of really cool.
I mean, you could also go musically side and say Marilyn Manson's from Ohio.
Yep.
So, like
he's from right in where I live right now, Canton. So
yeah, he's right around the Canton Akron area.
Yep.
That actually went to a Catholic high school, if nobody knows that. So we see how well those teachers did. But no, anyway, so John, tell us a little bit about yourself. Kind of give us a little rundown on the history of you. What kind of started you to write down these ideas you had, and what led you to this area?
Yeah, so great question. So let me start off by saying when I was a young child, I actually was terrified of horror up until I started reading Goosebumps books. So I got nightmares from movies and stuff, and eventually I grew out of that phase and really started enjoying just the overall aspects of horror and Goosebumps, like I had said. But obviously that transformed into this overall obsession with horror, becoming a paranormal investigator, all this different stuff. And even at a young age, I really enjoyed writing. I was always told I was good at it, but I never pursued it. Right? I kind of as time grew and I went to high school, I kind of just stopped thinking about it, stopped doing it. But I always think back. Well, I don't always, but I recently thought back to a time when I was in middle school, and back in the day, I don't know how old our viewers are, but they had these wheel-in TVs that they play movies in every once in a while. And
the good old VHS sets.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know you were born in 90, but
yep.
I mean, I was 84, so we had the wheel-in VHS. You guys may have had DVDs up.
No. It was a wheel-in VHS, 100%. But I don't even remember what the class was, but I had zero interest in watching the movie. And anyways, I start handwriting. It was a zombie story. I don't know whatever happened to it or whatever, but I was handwriting a zombie story. And back in those days, that's when kids would pass around notes and blah, 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 and all this other stuff, right? But I'm sitting there handwriting this story, and the teacher comes over and snatches the papers off my desk, and he must have assumed that's what I was doing, was writing a note. And 5 minutes later, he must have read through it and realized that's not what it was. He handed it back and apologized. But I had that epiphany, or when I was reminiscing, or anyways, when I was at a local park, because I've always wanted to get into the horror industry, and I've wanted to, whether it be a haunted house attraction, making movies, doing what I wanted to make my way into that industry one way or another. And there's a park here in Canton that's called Sippo Lake Park, and
Yep.
I was at the north entrance. I go there all the time to clear my head and stuff, and I'm standing out on this dock, just trying to think up ideas and brainstorm and all this stuff. And I turn around, and there's this big library up on the hill, and it just dawned on me, like, it just like a light bulb moment, right? And from that point forward, I thought, you know what, I was always good at writing. Why don't I give that a shot? And so I started to think, like, what could I feasibly write and enjoy writing? And I landed on middle grade horror, similar to Goosebumps, right? And I started just coming up, all these ideas started flooding into my head, and that's how I knew I was in the right space. I mean, I've got 30 to 40 ideas that I could just go and type right now if I wanted to. But yeah, that was kind of the light bulb moment that led me here. That was late last summer, early last fall, when I kind of made that self discovery, and pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I've been following your journey since you decided to start writing your books. Go ahead and tell everybody listening what your books are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, when I was brainstorming, I wanted to come up with a series name that I felt was original, but kind of conveyed fun horror, campy horror, kind of like Goosebumps, right? So I came up with a series title of Scareville, and the debut book is called Welcome to Scareville. I actually brought them down. I wasn't prepared the last podcast I was on discussing these, but I do have them here. So this is
Awesome.
Welcome to Scareville. That's the debut book in the series. And then the second book that just came out last Tuesday is called How to Create a Monster. So, yeah, Scareville is the name of the series, and it's going to be very similar to Goosebumps in the fact that each book is its own separate story. Now, I do plan on writing sequels at one point in time or another, but for now, each story is going to be separate. So
your story about how you started writing, it eerily reminds me of Stephen King,
really,
because he Bangor, Maine, grew up in Bangor, Maine. He started writing in high school, and there was a water tower that he would always go by. It was a water tower that was in a park, and there was a park bench because it was, a park, that he would always go sit at, and he would write. So your comparison to you sitting in a park and looking up at a giant library, to him looking at the water tower, which is actually one of the inspirations that he had when he wrote it.
that's really cool. I didn't know that.
So it just eerily reminds me of that kind of comparison as to how you got your start and everything like that.
Well, that's really cool. It's always interesting to hear the origin stories and where people draw their motivations from. I had no idea that Stephen King had that similar path. But maybe that's a thing for authors, like parks and just where we go to clear our heads and sort things out. Maybe, I don't know.
It's one of those things where you go to a peaceful place to write the most fucked up things. I'm zenning and I'm being peaceful, but you know what I'm doing is I'm also writing down.
Well, you know what it is too. Like, obviously, me being in middle grade horror, it's not going to be violent or anything like that, or dark. But horror is our happy place, right? Like, that's what makes us happy. We love horror movies. We love going to Halloween haunted house attractions, and where other people get scared, we laugh and we enjoy it, right? And so,
Yeah.
When I'm clearing my head out and I'm thinking, like, I come up with these really cool ideas and these concepts, and it excites me, right? And the only way I can do that is if I clear my head out. So I think that might be where the correlation happens. I've never really thought about it though.
I mean, it really honestly is like, as horror fanatics and fans and, devotees, we look at the world in a different way. So something that may scare the hell out of somebody else, we look at it as, oh, okay, that's funny.
Yep.
Like, so it's one of those things that just, like you said, we think differently, we act differently. We're not necessarily built differently, but we are different than the cookie cutter crowd, I guess you could say.
100%.
So I will ask you this. You brought up the whole horror thing. And I actually have a train about to come through. What, and I'll give you time to think about this. What are your top 5 horror movies? And now I will give you a preference to this. Trilogies, anthologies, anything like that can be bulked into one.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to think. I mean, I know my top 3 pretty easily. I would have to say number 1. Well, I'm going to put them in not numerical order. I'm just going to throw out 3 real quick and then hammer down the next 2. So the Conjuring series, even though I didn't like the third one as much, those first 2 were terrific. And the first movie really impacted me in such a way that, like, I was interested in the paranormal, but never really pursued it. And that movie made me want to pursue the paranormal. And that's the first time I left the movie theater feeling different, right? Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it had an impact on me. So the Conjuring series is one.
Kind of like, damn, I need to do this and look into this more.
Yeah, it felt more real, right? Like, it didn't feel like your typical horror. Like, it felt like that was even though I know that movie was embellished now that I've been in the industry, but at the time it felt like this is a real thing. Like, this was a very legitimate horror movie, and that's how it felt coming out of it. It was terrifying, to be honest. But yeah, so I would say A Nightmare on Elm Street is up there in my top 5 as well. I have a Freddy Krueger tattoo on my shin, so that speaks a little bit. And the genius behind A Nightmare on Elm Street's my real. I mean, obviously, Freddy Krueger's a hysterical character; he's funny, but the idea behind, like, if you go to sleep, you die. Like, there's no concept more terrifying than that, in my opinion, than any movie that's ever been made. It's genius. So,
I'm pretty sure they based it off sleep apnea. Like, if you fall asleep, you're dead.
Well, I forget what the story was. I'd have to go back and read it. But there was actually, I think it was somewhere in Asia, people were actually dying in their sleep and having, like, scratch marks over their body. I think that's actually where it came from.
Okay.
So I don't know the exact details on it, but I'm pretty sure that's where the inspiration originally did come from.
Okay. All right. So we got The Conjuring. We got Nightmare on Elm Street.
I would say Scream. Scream would be in there as well. Yeah,
okay.
I'm a big Wes Craven guy. So
of course you are. I mean, who isn't?
So those would be 3.
Are you excited for the new one coming out?
Scream 6,
7, 8, 9. I'm not sure what.
Okay, so
what
6 just came out in theaters.
Was that the one, New York?
Yes.
Okay.
And that one was I honestly thought that one was as good as the original, right up there. So really enjoyed that one. I think they're teeing up some big things for the next one. Hopefully.
Well, aren't they returning the original cast too?
If I don't know, I haven't read any reports into that, but if it's going the way me and my buddy Nolan have kind of hypothesized, I think they're going to bring back a lot of the original cast for the next.
They're going to bring back Nev Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, all of them.
Well, I think David Arquette. Well, unless, I mean, they said he died. Maybe he didn't. Who knows? They like to bring back characters that you thought died. So.
Look at the first one. Oh yeah, he died. Nope, here he is.
And I'm going to go with one that gets a lot of criticism, but I really enjoyed the Paranormal Activity franchise. Yes, some of the movies are a little outlandish and aren't the best, but man, you find me another producer, director, production company that can make a $10,000 movie and make hundreds of millions of dollars off the concept. I got to respect it. And honestly, I think it was the 5th or 6th movie in the series, The Ghost Dimension, had maybe from start to finish the best startle scares packed into one movie I've ever watched.
I'll name one for you right now that battles Paranormal Activity.
What's that?
Blair Witch Project.
I like that one as well. I do. I did really enjoy the Blair Witch Project. I wish they did
POV.
What's that?
I said small budget POV.
Yep. And that's kind of similar, like Chernobyl Diaries was another one in that low budget.
That was another good one. That was a good one.
Yep. And it's tough. I mean, you leave out a lot of different horror franchises. Obviously, there's Saw, there's Halloween, but for me, as much as I love all those other movies, Trick or Treat is my favorite Halloween movie ever made. I think people get lost in the sauce with Michael Myers, but I think Trick or Treat conceptually, I know a lot of people don't realize things with that movie when they're watching it for the first time, but like if you really pay attention and you watch that movie in the background, you'll see all the other stories playing out in the background of each individual scene, and like the fact that Sam is the spirit of Halloween, like
Yes.
people
Yeah.
miss out on that if they don't know. There's just so much genius in that movie that people don't realize, and that I love that movie.
I mean, I will say Trick or Treat is one of the best movies that I have ever watched. It's I was a fan of the Grindhouse series where they took Planet Terror and Death Proof and combined it into one, and there was a crossover of the two combined. So you take Trick or Treat and you combine 3 stories into one where they all intertwine. It's an absolutely masterpiece. I watch it every year. Like,
I watch it probably 3 or 4 times a year. I love that movie.
it's one of those ones that I just toss on the TV and just be like, okay,
Yep.
you know. All right, so I have to ask you. So obviously you are into the paranormal.
Yeah.
You have been, as we discussed prior, into the paranormal scene probably for a couple years. What made you lead to start collecting boards?
Uh, Honestly, I was against boards for a while. I've been in the paranormal industry for I'd say close to 10 years now, but it was up until recently. I don't even remember what made me get interested in it. I know I was filming my first documentary with Dead Republic with Mike Hatcher, my
Yep.
wife, and Marcus Howd. And at the time, Ouija boards in the paranormal community were very taboo still. Not many people were using them, talking about them, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to use one in our documentary. So I went out and bought one and had a really cool experience with it in that documentary. And I guess the love for them kind of branched out from there. And I became friends with Steve Brott, who's a renowned collector of Ouija boards. And he kind of gave me some tips on.
Very much so. I've seen his room, and yeah, I went out there and helped him out of jail out there in South Glen Falls, and yeah, I the tombstone, the wheelchair, the boards, everything. Like he has a pretty impressive collection.
He really does. Yeah. But he helped kind of I don't want to say mentor, but he gave me a lot of tips on like where to search, how to find, good deals on them, and that way, because a lot of vintage Ouija boards are going for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, so it's not feasible for most people to get them without knowing where to look. But
Yep.
I was fortunate for about a year or two to kind of run into some really good deals, and it's been a couple of years now since I've bought another Ouija board. I just haven't found those same kind of deals. But yeah.
Okay, so tell me this. You have right now. I can see you have 10 boards that I can see. Well, actually, 12 boards that I can see.
And the table that I'm using to prop up my laptop is another one. So.
Okay, so tell me, what are your top 3 Ouija boards you have?
Oh man.
And very shortly, give a little history behind each one.
Let me see. I might it's gonna be difficult for me to look, but so I would say the Yogi board is one of my favorites. It is from the 1940s. It is a glow in the dark Ouija board, and one of the reasons I love it is obviously because it's red, right? It kind of grabs the attention. But the fact that it has
so they were doing glow in the dark back in the 1940s.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure someone said it's probably a hazardous material like uranium or something that they used back in those days. But yeah, I always thought it was pretty cool. And then I like the Mitchie Manitou boards. These are really, really rare. They're from the 1920s, late 1910s, early 1920s. But I like them because of how different the layout of the board is versus your standard Ouija board. So,
Of course.
that's probably up there. And then, I don't know, they're all pretty much the same. I guess I'll go with the Mystic board. This one's pretty similar, again, from the 1940s. But it's a different style. You don't see too many that look like this one.
Yeah.
But it has like the different zodiac signs and stuff. But
And where's the yes no on that board?
I don't even know if it has one. It says reception good, reception bad, goodbye, hello. So I'm assuming maybe that's, I don't know. Oh,
Well,
there's the yes, there's
yeah.
the no.
Okay. All right.
It's hard to see. There you go.
All right. There you go. All right. Fantastic.
Honestly, I hadn't looked at it in so long, I forgot where the yes and no was.
All right, sir, you can take a seat. So impressive collection. I mean, like I said, I saw 12 boards behind you already, but you had more going around the wall. So very impressive. Um, do you collect anything other than Ouija boards, oddities, anything like that?
Oh yeah, I've got quite a bit. Hold on.
Are you one of those ones that does the? I collect haunted dolls.
So I don't collect like, how do I want to phrase it? I don't collect with the intent on getting haunted objects. However, I did have a situation come up with these. They were dolls, ironically. These clown dolls that I had purchased, also ironically from eBay, didn't claim them to be haunted. And when I was searching, I was just looking for. I typed in creepy toys on eBay, right? And
As every one of us does. I mean, because that's normal.
right. Right, and I was looking to donate them for raffle at a Paracon, and I came across these 3 clown dolls, and it didn't portray them as haunted. It didn't claim them to be haunted. It was a urbex person that had gotten them from an abandoned orphanage in Australia, and yeah, the pricing on them was extremely cheap, but the backstory made me believe maybe they could be right.
Yeah, I mean,
Um, And then, interestingly enough, I asked him after he had shipped them already, and I already purchased them. I was like, "Hey, like, what's the deal? These, are they haunted or not?" And he's like, "Well, I won't claim them to be haunted, but my wife told me to ensure that we shipped them separate when we flew to the U.S. Like, we didn't want them on a plane with us." Was what basically the way he phrased it. And I'm like, "Okay."
that's I mean, if I ever heard a red flag before, that's a red flag.
Yeah. But so I get these things, and right away I don't feel anything from them, and so I thought it was fine. But slowly, things in my life started to crumble. Like, you
Yep.
could say it was like the worst luck in your life. Like, every possible thing that could go wrong would go wrong. My wife's mental health deteriorated. There was a lot of issues in the marriage, and just I hit a lot of low points. And I was at my
Mhm.
parents' house one day, and my wife and I were kind of like separated at the time. I was staying there for a little bit. She was staying here.
Yeah.
And my mom goes, "Why don't you just get rid of all your creepy antiques? They're probably the things causing it." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I've had these items for years. Like, that's not the problem." And then it dawned on me, like, those dolls, I just got those things 2 or 3 months ago, and
And that's the thing. They don't decide when it's going to happen. They decide when it's going to happen.
right, exactly. And when she said that, and I had that self realization, like, it felt like the veil had been lifted, and I
Yep.
realized really what was going on. And I feel like those items, I feel like they had shielded themselves from me and went after my wife.
Oh, it's the vulnerable one they always go
Yep.
after.
Yep, because we had, I don't want to go into details, but we had some issues with miscarriages and stuff. So I think that was weighing on her pretty heavily at that time.
Of course.
And those dolls kind of fed on it. I don't think they were the exact reasoning for everything kind of going the way it did for a while, but I do think they were a cog in the wheel, if that makes sense, right?
No, it definitely does, because you know what? When things are going wrong, you always look for the outside explanation, the outside reasoning behind it. And sometimes the reasoning behind it is right in front of your face.
Yep.
And that's happened to me before. And have you since now gotten rid of the dolls?
Oh yeah, they were gone that day, literally. That day my mom made that announcement, I drove straight home, and I made a post on Facebook, and I stuffed them in a box with the only Bible our house had, and posted it on Facebook, a photo, and I was like, "Whoever wants these can come take them." And my
Okay.
buddy Eddie Pence was the first one to claim them, and he had a lot of similar issues after he took possession of them. His whole life was starting to fall apart, and now those items reside in Steve Hummel's Archive of the Afterlife, which is a haunted museum in West Virginia.
Yep.
So they're in his
Yep.
dark room. But Yeah.
Now, what is your opinion on? Because I will say I have a couple, and as a good friend of mine, Matt, would say, a couple enchanted objects. I wouldn't call them haunted, but they do have energy attached to them.
Yep.
So what would you say that is your starting factor to purchase something? Because are you drawn to it? Does something call to you?
Yeah. Typically, it's got to be something that kind of calls out to me, right? It's got to. I don't even know how to describe it because I have certain items in my room that look creepy, some items that don't. The items just kind of draw me, and I've. It's ironic, like my little. I'll show you this little clown music box, which I actually feature in my first book. This clown music box. I don't know if you can see it, pointing to this one. Um, it was tucked away in the corner of like a cabinet in this antique store. Like nobody would have seen it, and I just like a trout sniffing pig. I sniffed the thing out, and truffle sniffing pig, and sniffed it out, and just stuff like that. Like I just randomly find cool objects that I like to bring into the collection. So
See, I collect one of my big collections is I collect locks and keys.
okay,
So like old skeleton keys, old locks, things like that. And they don't realize a lot of those have a lot of energy attached to them. Like I have keys dating back to like 1908, 1910.
yep,
And those keys itself, like they are enormous. Like
100%.
so you believe in the whole energy transference of the whole an item can be haunted, enchanted, things like that. Like it also goes right along with attachments. Just like a spirit can attach onto a human, it can also attach onto an object.
Yeah, I think yes, it is possible. I'll answer that, but I think it's less common than a lot of people portray it. I think a lot of people want to feel like they have a house full of haunted items, and they want to brag and show off on Facebook and social media and say I've got all these haunted items and this, that, and the other. But I will tell you right now, if anybody went through what I went through for that year-long span, they would think otherwise. I always throw caution to the wind. Be very careful what you wish for, because if stuff like that happens, I don't know that everybody's as mentally strong as I was to get through something like that. So,
Of
um,
course.
I just a word of caution for people that are going into that realm. But be
Yeah,
careful.
if we want to talk about collecting haunted, enchanted, possibly cursed items, tread very carefully.
Yeah.
Don't you get what you ask for, pretty much. So you've been in the paranormal. I remember we talked about this prior, but you've been in paranormal for how long now?
About 10 years.
Okay, about 10
Right,
years.
like right after The Conjuring came out in 2013, it was literally that same time frame as when I started investigating.
So is that what spawned you into going and doing it, or
Yes and no. So I was a hardened skeptic to it until 2011, I want to say, when I was 21. Um, and I had moved out to an apartment in Akron with my old roommate Sean Botch. Excuse me, and he had mentioned that he has a spirit that follows him everywhere he lives. And me as a skeptic, I'm like, bullshit. Like you're pulling my leg. Cause he even like, he's like, the spirit's name is Bob. Like immediately as a skeptic, I'm like, you're full of shit. Like this isn't real. And, anyways, I do what all skeptics do. I started taunting and provoking and doing all these stupid things. And
so
all it was,
you pulled the whole ZB thing and was like, I'm here.
well, this was even before I even watched that show. I didn't even know what provoking. I wanted to believe because my wife was a believer. Sean, obviously, my roommate had said, This is real. Like whether you choose to believe it or not, it's real." And I didn't. But I wanted to believe it, so I did the only thing I could. I talked shit, and I hoped something would happen. And
Well, like
boy,
they
did stuff
said,
happen.
like they always say, and I believe it was Jason Hawes that said it. I can't remember exactly, so don't quote me on this. But a believer is just a skeptic or a skeptic is just a believer that hasn't had an experience yet.
I agree with that.
Once you have that experience, it's the oh shit moment.
Yep. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, but I mean, just crazy stuff started happening, and so from that point forward, I was a believer. But I didn't know what I like. I didn't know how to get into the paranormal at that point, right? I wasn't part of the community where I had all these friends that could share stuff and be like, "Oh, you can come to this place, this place." This. Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was a couple more years, and then The Conjuring came out, and my wife and I were working at a call center at the time, and there was a few people that actually did investigating that were there. I don't know if you're familiar with Sean Gilmore or not. He's from like back then he was in Actovision, which was a pretty big documentary team back then. But I became
Yes,
friends
sir.
with
I am
him.
familiar with him.
Yep, great guy. But him, along with a couple other friends, Justin and Jill, they're married now. Green, here locally in Ohio, they kind of introduced us to the paranormal and how to get into investigating and doing public ghost hunts. And that's how I got my start. I started going to OSR public ghost hunts with a flashlight and a digital recorder. And
So obviously, you know Scott Sukkel though, right?
Sukkel. The name sounds familiar. I can't put a face to the name though.
He was one of the ones that ran the public ghost hunts at OSR.
Maybe that's what. Maybe I'd have to see his face. But the name sounds familiar. I can't picture his face right now though.
Bigger guy, bald head.
Yes. Yep. I do remember that name. Yep. Okay. Yep. As soon as you described him. What's that?
I said I love Scott to death. He's no longer with them right now, but I mean, so like we were talking earlier. So you're in Ohio, you're in the Akron Canton area.
Yep.
So you're centralized a lot around a lot of different hotspots in the area, whether it be across state line, whether it be in state and everything like that. So do me this favor real quick.
Yeah.
Give me 5 locations in Ohio for a paranormal investigator that is a must visit.
Oh God. You're restricting me to 5. You know what's funny though?
You know what? I'll give you 7. Okay. I'll give you a little leeway. I'll give you 7. Okay.
You know what's funny? Like the way you say that, like a lot of states don't have the ability to have a top 5. That's the craziest part about it, right? Like they don't.
I live in Massachusetts, so I can name 5 right off the top of my head.
Yep. Yeah. So like states like Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts, those states typically can be fine with it, but there's so many states that just don't have that many locations open. So it's kind of fascinating. But Ohio, man, obviously OSR is up there. Ohio State Reformatory is probably my all-time favorite place. Irregardless of if you get activity there or not, it's a hit or miss place in terms of activity. But man, just being there, it's just such an awesome place, an awesome energy to feel, and the architecture is beautiful. OSR is always going to have the crown for me in Ohio. Outside of that,
OSR, I will interject for a second.
Yeah,
OSR
yeah,
was actually my first ever investigation.
Same.
I was 13 years old.
Wow.
I'm 39 now, so I've been in this field for 28 years. So, and that was my first ever investigation. That was before the Historical Society took it over. It was just after the prison closed. It still had all the records and the documents and everything in the basement.
That's so cool.
And I'm reading through these documents, like seeing somebody that was sentenced to 2 years for horse thievery and things like that. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I wish I could have been there and seen, like, they have blow up of documents and stuff like that now, but I wish I could have been there back then and saw that kind of stuff. That would have been really neat. But if anybody hasn't been there, even if it's just a day tour, go check OSR out. It's worth the trip. It's such a cool place.
I mean, a day tour is only like what, $13 at a self-guided, and you can spend the entire day in there.
I think they've raised the price recently. It's $25 now, but even still, like,
oh shit, okay.
If you think
even
like
then it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, like Trans-Allegheny is like $100 for the day, like, right? Like $25 is nothing in comparison. So, anyways, OSR would be one of them. Madison Seminary is up there. It's hands down one of the most active places I've ever been to. Not just because it's in Ohio, but it's a crazy place.
I've been to Madison prior to Adam picking up the building.
Yep.
And I was there with the previous owners right when they opened it up. My team actually from Ohio, actually, that was our base camp for training new investigators and everything.
Really? That's cool.
Yes. Yeah. So I've spent a lot of time in Madison.
So it's another one of those places that you just drive up to it, you see it, and you're like, wow, this is a really, I don't want to say foreboding, like you feel creeped out. That's one of those ones you feel creeped out driving up to, I guess you would say.
Now, do you feel like people are standing there staring out the windows at you?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like you pull into that driveway to go around to the back, and you just feel people like looking out the windows, like,
100%.
what are you doing here?
And maybe that's what, like, why you feel so uneasy pulling up to that building. Because there's some places you'll pull up to and you just feel really amped and really excited. But that's one of the ones like you pull up to and you're like, this feels different.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yep. So Madison Seminary is in the top 5, 7, whatever we're doing. Oh goodness, I'm having a brain fart. House of Wills. I don't know if you ever had a chance to investigate there in Cleveland, Ohio. But
14 times.
That place is nuts.
I was in there. I knew 2 of the tour guides, and they actually contacted me to help come run tours one night because they're like, hey, we're down somebody. Can you come help? We have a group coming in. And I went and did it one night, and I'm like, nope, not. Like, walking through that building alone is
Can't imagine.
Absolutely terrifying.
And it's a maze too. Like, you could easily get lost in that place.
Oh my God. Just to get up to Dreamland is like insane. Like, I know the owner still owns it now, because I heard he was trying to like live in it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But the last time I was there, they had no active plumbing inside the house.
It was still the same when I was there 3 or 4 years ago. They had no active plumbing in there.
Okay, so I don't know if he's actually living there, because the last thing I remember is the House of Wills is in the middle, and I don't want to be offensive to anyone out there listening, but it's in the middle of the ghetto.
It's a rough neighborhood, very rough,
very, very rough. So, but yeah, some of the experiences I had at House of Wills were up there in my top experiences.
Yeah, I'm gonna go off on a side story real quick. We were running an ITC session upstairs in Mr. Will's bedroom.
Oh,
and for listeners out there, Mr. Wills was kind of a ladies' man back in the day before he had passed. And we're running an ITC session, and we captured what sounded like a squeak and a bang against the wall, and then we heard a woman yell. So we asked Mr. Wills, "Are you busy getting it in right now?" And he said, "Yes, leave now." And that was the response. So
you
like,
wanted privacy.
It's just so weird that like you could capture something like that. It was cool. Cool.
I had more experiences in the coffin room.
Yep.
And the bar.
I don't even know if I remember where the bar was. The auditorium was nuts too.
The auditorium is one of my best pictures actually came from the auditorium.
Yeah.
The bar is right off the ballroom.
See, I think he had the ballroom closed off when we were there, so I don't know if I ever got to go to the bar.
Okay, so the ballroom, you walk into the ballroom, and right off to the left-hand side, there's a little set of steps, like 2 steps, that lead up into a personal bar.
I don't know
where when he hosted parties, that's where everybody would go to get drinks, and he actually employed bartenders. And one of the bartenders was actually murdered outside after one of the parties.
I feel like maybe I don't know if we spent any time. I don't remember. It sounds familiar now that you described it like that, though.
All right, so we got House of Wills. Daryl Marston, Ghost Hunters, good friend of mine. He actually wrote a book on the House of Wills because of his experiences he had there. And I told him when I first met him, he had never been there before. And I was like, you need to go there. And he went there, and I saw him the next year after he went, and he looked at me and goes, I'm never going back there.
It's funny you say that. Like, I never watched their show, but I was at the Parapsychon, which is a paranormal convention down in OSR.
OSR, yep.
This was a few weeks, 2-3 weeks ago at this point, 4 weeks. I don't remember. I was in May. And normally I don't pay much attention to paranormal celebrities or whatever, but a few of our friends we went with wanted to see the Ghost Brothers do their speech spiel thing or whatever. And someone had asked them, because they had filmed at the House of Wills, what's a location that you will never go back to? And all of them without hesitation said House of Wills. And
that is actually one of the funniest episodes I've ever watched. Like, I don't watch many shows.
Right, same.
And I will say one of the only shows I ever really watched was Ghost Hunters in the beginning.
Yep.
But also now it's Destination Fear, Project Fear, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
Because they come right out and say, we're documentarians. We're not investigators. We are just trying to find this out. So I enjoy watching them. But the episode with the Ghost Brothers when they filmed the House of Wills, and the one I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Juwan or whatever the name was. Was like, no, I'm not going in there. I'll stay out in this van the entire damn night. I don't care. And you know what? There are some people that I actually did investigations with that they did the walkthrough and everything, and they were like, hey, I'm just gonna leave.
The energy in there, I don't want to get into detail because I know he's trying to keep it private now, even though it's been made public, but there's been ritualistic practices that have impacted.
Yes, does he still have the sculptures in there?
Yeah, I mean, when I was there 3 or 4 years ago, yes, was the answer to that question. I don't know whether it is now. I haven't been there in so long. We were actually supposed to film our first documentary there, and they dumped us so Nick Groff could go film his Death Walker show there. So
yeah, well, there is a I looked into it about the price of investigating it, and if you break down the price, it is exactly 66.60 per person.
That's funny.
So yes, and the owner of it is an outright spoken Satanist. He doesn't hide that fact.
Yep.
And the fact that they dropped him in the middle of that neighborhood, Godspeed, good luck. Because if anybody knows Cleveland, Ohio, that's kind of a territory you don't kind of.
That was a scary neighborhood for sure. And I don't, I live in Canton. I'm from the Akron area. Like I've been around rough neighborhoods, but that area takes the cake. It was a rough neighborhood to be in.
Yeah. They wouldn't allow us when the first investigation I went there. They wouldn't allow us outside without 2 people going out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? And they're like, just because.
Right across the road.
Literally right across the road. But the funny thing about it is right behind it is the police station.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like literally a road up is the police station.
Well, they probably go in the opposite direction to get away from that neighborhood too.
Like, nope, we're just gonna drive around this one and we're gonna go this way. All right, so we got 3 or 4. We got 3.
So we got House of Wills, OSR, Madison Seminary. I'm going to do these rapid fire because I know we're getting closer towards the end of the show. Fairfield County Infirmary is another one. That would be 4.
Okay.
That's down in Lancaster, Ohio. I'm actually going to be going to a paranormal convention there this Saturday. So
you're going to FCI? I'm assuming you're going to FCI Con.
Yes. Yeah, that's another Adam Kimmel building and event. Yep. So that one's in my top 5, 7. Prospect Place, which you and I had kind of discussed already. That's also in there. Really awesome place with a lot of history. Really cool place. Trying to think. I know that there's other ones. I'm having a brain fart at the moment. I had one. It actually recently closed down. It's also in Mansfield, the same city as OSR, and it's called the Bisman Building.
The Bisman Building is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, crazy place. They don't allow paranormal there anymore, but yep. But that place, it was a really cool place. A lot of history again, and we had a lot of good activity. See what else, man. There's so many. St. Joseph's Hospital they tore down in Lorain, Ohio. That was another really good place. And then Molly Stark Hospital, which is another place that Adam Kimmel's trying to buy, and I hope he gets.
I hope he does too, because I've seen the chatter about it, and I really hope he gets it.
we investigate just around the fence of this building. We get
Oh yeah, off the chart.
I've seen all kinds of shadow figures, and that place would be like it would be like the Waverly Hills of Ohio if Adam can get that place. Like it would be massively popular, massively active, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%. All right, so we're about to 14 minutes left of the show. So I'm going to ask you this, and this is one of the questions I've always asked on all of my radio shows. If you had to assemble a team, fact or fictional, and there's the curveball, fact or fictional, living or dead, a team of 5 investigators to take into an investigation with you. So you have 5, including yourself. Who would your dream team be?
I don't even know if I could come up with a dream team per se, but obviously, like when I was doing documentaries, my answer would have been different. I would have wanted professionalism and all this other stuff. Now that I'm more just going out having fun and trying to get those personal experiences, I've kind of learned, just having that high energy brings out a lot of activity in a lot of cases. So,
of course,
I don't know if I could. I would want to bring high energy. I would bring Kevin Hart as one of them because I know that just seeing him in an investigation would be hysterical first and foremost. Like I can just picture him yelling and screaming and running down hallways trying to get out, but
running into a wall probably.
Kevin Hart would be one. Man. I would bring back Wes Craven from the grave. I would like to just to meet him, to be honest. So I think he would be a part of my team. Oh, Lordy. We're going to bring in one serious person. I'm going to say Nikola Tesla would be number 4 part of the team.
And I love you for that because no one ever, every time I've asked this question, no one ever brings up Tesla.
He's one of the original people that like researched into this. I would love.
Everyone always brings up Holzer.
Yep. So we got 4. I got to bring in another high energy, funny person. Who would be? Oh, man, I'm drawing a blank. Who's a funny actor? I'm gonna say Will Ferrell. I don't know. That would be no. You know what? I'm gonna bring in Will Ferrell. We'll do Will Ferrell. He's acted with Kevin Hart before, and it was funny. So I'm gonna do those.
You know what? I have one for you that you're gonna be like, oh shit, why didn't I think of this? Bert Kreischer.
That would be great too. I don't know how he would do though. I don't know if he would be like if he would be super into it and like being serious, or if he would be funny the whole way. I don't know how he would approach it. But
he would rip his shirt off and run through the building. I can guarantee you. All right, so give us a little hint on the. I know you can't talk much about it, and I'm not prying and I'm not poking, but give us a little bit of information about your next book that's coming out.
Yeah, so book 3. It was actually the very first book I wrote. I wrote these completely out of order. Book 3 was just the first thing that came to my mind as a book idea. But when I wrote it and I got done writing it, I'm like, it's not going to be a great lead-off book for the series. Like, it's a great story, great book, but it's not something that's going to really pull people in for the other books, right? So it's a really good story, really solid story, but it was the first book I wrote, and it's called Monsters of Mount Hope. And it's a story. Basically, these parents are taking their kid. He's 12 years old. He's about to become 13. They're taking him down there for his 13th birthday to see his grandparents in this city called Mount Hope, Kansas. They're from Kansas City. It's like a 3 or 4 hour drive. Long story short, the kid's bummed. Like, why can't I be in Kansas City with all my friends and this happen in town? Like, blah, 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 like most kids would be. They'd be upset, right? You're taking me away from my friends, making me my grandparents in a small podunk town. So they get there, and obviously he's bummed out the whole time. But when they're pulling into town, he sees a monster out in the woods in the wilderness, and it starts to pique his interest. Like, because he's been going to this area for years. He grew up going there for like summer breaks and stuff, and he had never seen a monster. But on the way in for this trip, he sees a monster, piques his interest. So curiosity, obviously killed the cat, right? Like, kid's not dying, by the way. He's not dying.
All right. 2 seconds and keep explaining the book.
Yeah, no worries. Anyways, they get into town. He sees the monster. His parents chalk it up like it was probably an animal or something out in the woods, right? But things start happening. He starts hearing noises. He starts seeing other figures and stuff out his window, and so he starts piquing his curiosity, and he goes to. It's been so long since I wrote it. It's been. I think he went to a comic book store in the story, and the comic book store had a magazine rack, and he found a magazine rack that basically just listed off a bunch of monsters and the legends and stuff, and tales from across the country. And lo and behold, the monsters that he's been kind of seeing are featured in the book in Mount Hope, Kansas, where he's staying with his grandparents. So that opens up a whole other can of worms. And now he's a big believer, and there's monsters and this other stuff. And him and one of his friends start to investigate. They go after one of their bullies that they think is one of the monsters. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but they make some discoveries, and the end of the book has a really good solid twist that I don't think people will see coming. I try to include a twist in every book. The first one's great. Second one, not as great of a twist. And then the third book, which will be Monsters of Mount Hope, has a really good twist at the end as well.
I want to say that it kind of has similarities to The Shining. And there's another one I'm trying to think of, but it kind of has that whole dynamic, which is fantastic because you're pulling from some of the greatest horror movies ever for ideas. But I know your ideas are original and it's written in your own words and everything like that. But influences, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Is definitely there.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, for a long time I wasn't a big reader, so to be honest with you, I've never read The Shining. I've never seen the movie for The Shining either. But it's interesting that my mind played out the same way. Yeah. So very cool. But yeah.
All right. So with a little bit left. All right. So we have about 5 minutes left. Tell me about what's coming up for you, where you're going to be, where people can meet you, where they can order your books, things like that. Give yourself a selfless promotion, shameless plug. Let's go for it.
All right. So I'm going to try to slow my brain down and focus here because there's so many different ways I can go. So this weekend, Saturday, June 17th, I'm losing track of my days here. June 17th, I'll be at FCI Con down in Fairfield County Infirmary in Lancaster, Ohio. And I'm not a vendor. I'm not a special guest. But if people have purchased my books, feel free to come up to me. I will sign them, no questions asked. I'll take care of you. After that, next week, I've got a paranormal investigation at a place called the Wickyards, Youngstown, Ohio. But I will also be doing an author event in Tiffin, Ohio.
Wait. The Wickyards? Or really?
Yeah. Yep.
I lived in Youngstown. So
really,
he
lives in Youngstown, and apparently this location, I don't know what they do exactly. He would have more info, but apparently they do allow paranormal investigating in this place called the Wickyards. I don't know what it is, so I'm doing that Friday, the 23rd, and then 24th I'll be in Tiffin, Ohio. Very, very early the next morning. I'll be making a 2-hour trip to Tiffin. At a bookstore called Pan Bookstore, where I'll be doing an author event, book signings, purchases, all that good stuff. And then after that point in July, I'll probably start writing book 4, which will be launched probably in November, would be the goal. And then at the end of July, I've got an event at Hinsdale House with Mike Hatcher and his team. Again, if people purchase tickets and come to that and want me to sign their books and they've bought them already, great. And then the next day again, I've got another author event right after that. It's going to be in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. Another author event that I'll be doing, and then I've got another right now is the books.
Okay.
My brain is constantly working ways that I can try to market these books, stickers, book. Like my brain's going in a mile a minute in 20 different directions on how I can try to push these books, because I've tried reaching out to like newspapers like the Action Beacon Journal that are pretty sizable news stations. Nobody returning emails, nothing. So I running dead ends, but I'm not stopping. Like I just pivot and go to the next thing, and I've started reaching out to some influencers, and I'm trying to get them to shout the books out. So we'll see what happens, but the
Well, I
books
can
are
help you
also,
with that because I still have connections in Ohio. I mean, I'm about 6 years older than you, so I mean, I've made some connections back in Ohio as well as all over the Eastern Seaboard area. So I will
awesome.
definitely start pushing that for you and maybe get something hooked up for you here pretty soon.
I appreciate that, Russ. More than you know. I mean, a lot of people think it's like blowing smoke when I it, such hard publishing when you don't work.
Sorry, every that's sitting in their mom's basement or whatever has a podcast these days, and